Hey guys, it's Chris from Highline Guitars and you're watching another Luthier's Quick Tips. In this episode, I'm going to try to explain when you should be applying grain filler and sanding sealer during the process of applying finish on your guitar build. This seems to be a confusing topic for a lot of folks. So I'm going to try to explain it. And unfortunately, there's no easy, simple answer to this. Really, the order is dependent upon what the outcome is that you're shooting for, and it can differ depending on that outcome. So I think the easiest way to explain it is going to be to present some scenarios which I hope will explain how and when to apply sanding sealer, grain filler, and ultimately your color coats and top coats and that sort of thing. So we'll start out with the most basic scenario. Here we have a guitar that has been sanded and is ready for finish. And this is what I'm going to use to explain all the different scenarios. But for this first scenario, let's say all you want to do is apply a nice glossy top coat. You don't want to stain it and you don't want to paint it. What you do want, however, is you want a smooth surface where you can see the wood grain and the wood pores, but you can't feel their texture. Obviously, you're going to have to fill the grain. You're also going to have to seal the wood because sealing the wood will prevent moisture from absorbing into the wood, which can affect its shape and can cause problems with tuning, stability, intonation, playability, and that sort of thing. So how would we go about filling and sealing this wood? Well, the first thing you would do is apply your grain filler. Now the grain fillers that I like to use, actually my favorite grain filler is Solar Res I Can't Believe It's Not Lacquer. This is a fast curing, non-toxic, low odor product, and it does a fantastic job of filling the grain, and then when exposed to sunlight it can cure bone dry in just a few minutes, so you can keep moving quicker through your project. But really what I like about it the most is the fact that once it is cured, it won't shrink into the wood grain. Now the other types of fillers that are popular that I've also used quite a bit are the water-based fillers like Aquacoat and Crystalac. And these products work really well. However, they can take a little bit longer to dry and cure, and when they do cure, they tend to shrink back a little bit. So you have to make sure that you apply a sufficient amount to fill the grain, and then you have to allow it to dry thoroughly so that you can check to make sure you don't have to add more in order to completely fill the grain. With the Solar Res, you don't have to worry about that. 2 or 3 coats is usually all it takes and you've got the grain filled, and you can do that all within about an hour. So I'll let you decide what you like to use. But on a plain guitar where we're not going to be applying any stain or paint, you would apply your grain filler first. You'd apply it as smooth as you can, let it dry and cure. Then you would apply several coats of sanding sealer. And you're doing this really for a couple of reasons. First of all, like I said, it will seal the wood and prevent moisture from being absorbed. And it will give you a surface that you can level sand smooth prior to applying your final clear top coats. And that just makes it easier to apply. Now for the second scenario, let's say you wanted to dye or stain the guitar. In that case, you're going to use a slightly different approach. The first thing you're going to do after you've sanded the wood and get it ready for finish is you're going to apply a single coat of sanding sealer. What that's going to do is it's going to allow for the even and consistent absorption of your dye stain. If you don't apply the sanding sealer first, there's a good chance that your dye stain is going to absorb inconsistently, which leads to blotchy light and dark patches on the wood, and that just looks unprofessional. So if you want a consistent color from your dye stain, you would want to put the sanding sealer down first, let it dry, and then you're going to sand it off the surface. And what that's going to do is it's going to remove it from the harder face grain, but it's going to leave it in the softer, more absorbent end grain, which typically is found around the edges of the guitar body. So that will prevent these areas from getting too dark when you apply your dye stain. Now, once you've applied that sealer, let it dry and sanded it back, then you're going to apply your dye stain. Now, some folks like to enhance the appearance of the pour and the grain. And one way that they'll do that is they'll tint their grain filler and apply it and then sand it back before proceeding on. What I like to do is I like to enhance the grain using my dye stain. So when I'm ready to apply it, the first color I'll apply is going to be the darkest color first. And I'll let that soak in, dry, and then I'll sand off the excess, leaving it just in the grain and the pores. And that will help to enhance the appearance of that grain and pore structure. Now, once that's done, I can then apply the final color to get the color and the appearance that I want from the dye stain. Now, since I'm using water-based products, I typically will mix up my own dye stain, and I'll simply do that by using, for example, Crystalac pigments or TransTint dyes or Keta dyes. And I'll mix these into water and then apply it. Well, because there isn't a binder present, that color is going to it's in the wood, but you can rub it off with your fingers, especially if you're not wearing gloves. So once I've applied the color, I'll apply another coat of sanding sealer to fix that color, to bond it into the wood so that it's not going to go anywhere. Once that's done, I can then proceed with applying my clear grain filler. And usually I'm going to be using the Solarez so that I can cure it quickly and keep moving on. But if you want to use a water-based, you could use the Aquacoat or Crystalac. And you would apply that, and you would apply it as smoothly as you can. The smoother you apply it, the easier the process is going to be later on to get a smooth surface prior to spraying your clear coats. So you would apply it as smoothly as possible, and you'd let it thoroughly dry. Give it several hours, maybe even overnight between coats. That way you can check to see if the grain filler has shrunk back into the grain and pore structure, and that will tell you whether or not you need to apply more to continue building up the film thickness so that you fill that grain. Now, once the filler has been applied and the grain and pore structure has been filled in, then I'll apply probably 3 to 4 coats of sanding sealer on top of the grain filler. And once that's dry, I'll lightly sand it down level and smooth. And that just makes it easier when I apply my clear top coats to get a really smooth finish that's going to take very little work to level sand, polish sand, and buff out later on. Now, if I was going to paint the guitar a solid opaque color, I would first put down my grain filler, and I would fill all the grain in, probably 2 or 3 coats. Try to apply that as smooth as possible, and give it plenty of time between applications to make sure that it's thoroughly dried, and that if it's going to shrink, it will shrink down, and you can tell whether or not you need to continue to apply your grain filler in order to get the filler or to get the grain completely filled. But like I said, I like to use the Solarez because it doesn't shrink. Once the filler has been applied, the next step would be to apply multiple coats of sanding sealer. And then when that dries, I would sand it down smooth. And from there, I could proceed with applying my primer and color. Now, one thing you can do during the process of applying that sanding sealer is you can tint it with color. So you could, in a sense, be making your own primer. So if I was going to paint the guitar a solid color, especially if it's going to be a light color, I would tint my sanding sealer with white, and then I would spray it down. And another trick here is Once you've applied that light application of tinted sanding sealer, let it dry, you can then apply a darker tint of sanding sealer. If you put down white first, you could put down like a gray or a rust color. Let that dry. Then you would come back and block sand all of that darker tinted sanding sealer off the surface. And as you sand, you would start to see the white appearing underneath it. Wherever you see that white appear first, wherever it breaks through as you're sanding off that darker tinted grain or sanding sealer, that indicates a high spot. So you would completely sand it all off. Then you would reapply another application of the light tinted sanding sealer, followed by a coat of, just a single coat of your dark tinted sanding sealer. Let that dry and then sand again. Eventually you're going to get to a point where that dark color is going to sand off consistently over the entire surface. That tells you the surface is level. At that point, you could spray your final light tinted sanding sealer, let it dry, then apply your color coats. And you'd probably spray 2 or 3 color coats to get uniform, consistent coverage. From there, you could then apply your final clear top coats. So I hope that makes sense. I know it's kind of confusing, but really, if you think through your finishing process and the outcome that you want to achieve, you can kind of get an idea of what order to apply the products to get the best results. So, you can go back and rewatch this video to kind of get an idea of which scenario is closest to what you're going to try to do. But before you apply it to your guitar, I would highly recommend that you do some tests on scrap wood to see what's going to work best for you in your particular situation. So I hope this video was helpful. If so, please give it a thumbs up. And if you like videos on building guitars, click the subscribe button if you don't already subscribe. Click the bell for notifications so that you'll be notified every time I post up a new video, which is usually about twice a week. And if you'd like to show my channel some support, purchase one of the t-shirts I have for sale down in the merch bar down below. And head over to eguitarplans.com and purchase a plan for either a guitar or one of the many different kinds of tools that I use to build guitars. And even if you don't build the plan that you purchase, just know that your purchase is helping to support this channel and will keep me going. So until the next episode, take care, stay safe, wear a mask, and I'll see you soon.